You're watching BreakThru News.
Hello everyone, I'm Charlotte Hohenstein and you're watching BreakThru News on BTR Today. We're talking about the unfolding scandal at the Department of Veterans Affairs. The media may have moved on, but that doesn't mean that the VA's problems are behind us. Joining us to discuss this is head of the New York chapter of Yale Veterans Association, decorated soldier and now author, Adrian Bonenberger, in the studio with me. Hi Adrian. And Molly Neffel of BTR's Radio Dispatch podcast. So, Adrian, you served in Afghanistan. You ultimately rose to captain. You're featured actually in the New York Times back in 2010, and now you've just published a book, Afghan Post, about your experience. What's the biggest difficulty in adjusting back to civilian life as a vet?
Well, I think the challenges are different for different veterans. For the veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan, and the other conflicts that we have going on, like in Yemen, for example, I think part of it is you're forced to go outside of yourself and what you're used to as a civilian in a first world country. You're forced to break just about every one of the most important taboos that are expressed in the Judeo-Christian tradition. And so coming back from that is naturally very challenging. But even for a veteran who hasn't served in combat, being part of an intensely hierarchical and communal structure is very strange. And everybody that I know has experienced some type of difficulty getting reacclimatized to civilian life.
Molly, do you think that there's in general a disconnect between civilians and vets? Do you think that we appreciate that gulf of experience enough?
Well, I would defer to Adrian or any other veteran for their experience first. But I mean, from my point of view, I think absolutely. I think that there is a lot of rhetoric about about supporting the troops, but I think something like what this VA scandal shows is a really important and fundamental lack of support when it comes to continuing to care for veterans and continuing to to express thanks for their service, not just during active wars, but afterwards as well.
Let's talk a bit about the VA scandal, which has now been going on for a few months. And certainly, I mean, perhaps one of the silver linings is that it's maybe forced the public to finally sit up and take real notice of veterans in the US, or at least more so than before. Adrian, what do you make of the timing of this scandal? Because on the one hand, people might say it's better late than never, especially with an increasing influx of soldiers coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq, and yet on the other hand it just feels like it's so late. We've been having watchdog reports. There have been 18 watchdog reports since 2000 complaining about the VA, and now 14 years later it's finally breaking. What do you think about the timing?
This has been a huge and quiet topic of conversation in the veteran community for a while. And I think part of it has to do with the nature of veterans. And of course, most of the people that I know who are vets tend to be, when I was growing up, there were, my grandfathers and their friends who had served in World War II. And currently, are people that served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I think that the nature of service, for a professional soldier, a volunteer, or a draftee is fundamentally the same in the sense that you're conditioned not to question hierarchies. You're conditioned not to question institutions and assume on a certain level that if something is wrong or messed up, it's probably your fault. You didn't do it correctly. So I think one of the reasons it's taken so long to galvanize enough support within the veterans community, or sort of outrage or something like that, is that anecdotally each veteran alone probably thinks that, oh, I didn't do the paperwork right, or I'm waiting for a month, but or 6 months or however long they're waiting, but that's just my situation. It's not endemic to the system. And I guess it just took everybody. This is common sense stuff. I mean, for years, I've heard people complaining that they weren't getting the right type of treatment, or they're having to wait for a long time. And it was much worse for my grandparents' generation and for the Vietnam vets, who really had to struggle through much worse than we are. They used to wait years for service, and now it's a matter of months. But yeah, I think it seems to have been that Phoenix story that really cracked open the floodgates, and people realizing that, oh, it's not just me. Oh, that's everywhere. People are having to wait. That's unacceptable.
I mean, and the VA is a very decentralized system, right? Which means that the quality of care can be very inconsistent, and I'm sure that there are facilities that are very good about serving vets, and then there are, as we're discovering, many that are not. I just want to follow up with you, Adrian. So do you think that vets on the whole feel hopeful now that this scandal is breaking, or as opposed to feeling betrayed by discovering the depth of the problems?
I can't speak for everyone. I know I've found it very surprising. I've found the depth surprising. I have, but I do think that the VA is a very resilient organization and filled with some pretty terrific leadership, top down, and I am hopeful that the changes that we're looking at now that's going to make some type of a difference, especially with technology. I think a big part of the problem was just that going back to Vietnam, you had a system that was based on analog, that was based on files, and one of the chief complaints you hear from vets. Sorry to sort of dominate the conversation here.
No,
is,
you're the expert.
Like, my records got lost. And with the new electronic system, which that was one of Shinseki's babies, really trying to push that, it's impossible to lose files. You can't delete a file without that raising a flag in the system. And the people who are evaluating the files, and there's been some research that says that the people that process the paperwork, in some cases, have been responsible for the delays because of the system of rewards and incentives in place to process paperwork. Now, because of the electronic system, you can track and say, oh, okay, this file was opened by so and so 7 days ago. They have 7 days left to act. If not, that's a red flag on Raider, Joe Smith, or Jane Doe, whatever the case may be.
Well, hopefully that will make a real, and I'm sure it will make a significant difference to the quality of the care that vets are getting. We're going to take a break in a second. Molly, are you optimistic about the scandals really galvanizing public interest towards vets for the long term?
I mean, I would like to be. I sure hope so, but it's also very difficult because I think this scandal has been very politicized in terms of suddenly maybe we all want to. One group of conservative commentators wants to talk about this in order to criticize the president, and if that obviously if that leads to progress in terms of actually providing care to veterans, that's all for the greater good. But it's also, I think, it's also important to keep in mind that I hope that this isn't just an opportunist thing when it comes to creating a big deal. The scandal, this has obviously been going on for a really, really long time.
Well, we are going to take a break. We'll be right back in a moment after a brief excerpt from this week's episode of Serious Business featuring Field Mouse. Everyone, great. We're back with our discussion on the crisis and how we treat our veterans. So we touched on the idea of leadership before. Let's talk a bit more about the figure of Shinseki, Adrian, because he actually seems quite a tragic figure in that he seems to be universally respected by everyone, actually did make many positive differences to the VA. He cut waiting times for the GI Bill, for example, from months to days, changed rules on disability benefits. Do you think, is there any argument to be made that he shouldn't resign, or is this just impossible and we'll hopefully remember him with more nuance, but he absolutely needs, it is absolutely right that he resigned?
Well, it's a great question. I think that history is going to be very kind to him as one of the great leaders of the VA. But in his resignation speech, he said something that really stuck out to me, which was, and my roommate John Ismay noticed this, who is also a vet. He's a Navy EOD vet. He said that that the reason he was resigning was that the VA suffered from a systematic integrity problem. And to put that in context, just about the greatest insult you can levy within the military is to say that a person has no integrity. Like that's fighting words in the military. Like, you have no integrity is, think of the worst curse that you could encounter in a bar that would normally lead to blows, some sort of charge on a person's reputation or sexual prowess or something. That's, you have no integrity in the military. And so what he's saying there is that it's not just about implementing electronic systems or improving the bureaucracy, but that there's a really big cultural problem within the VA, which I'm on the outside. I can't look in and see it, but if that is the case, then that is partly something that he has to own. It is.
And now we have Robert McDonald, the former CEO of Procter & Gamble, coming in, nominated by Obama. Molly, Obama seems to have blindsided everyone with this choice. I know that Paul Rykov, who's the founder and president of the Iraqi and Afghanistani Veterans Association, said that Bob McDonald was not on anyone's list, which is quite surprising. Do you think that this choice bodes well for cooperation, because he does seem to cross the partisan divide, or do you think that there's going to be a lot of backlash inevitably?
It seems as if oftentimes Obama is in a situation where no matter what he does, there is conservative backlash, and so I've actually found it quite difficult, especially in media coverage, especially in mainstream media coverage of this story, to kind of sift out, to straighten out what controversy is what, and what is kind of political posturing, and what is actually based in the real lived experiences and real needs of veterans.
Adrian, how much of a drawback is Robert McDonald's lack of military experience? I mean, he's had 5 years in the military, trained at West Point, which is obviously valuable, but compared to Shinseki's 4-star general ranking, I mean, it's almost negligible. He's clearly a corporate man with 33 years of corporate experience. Do you think that for vets this is a huge downside and going to be difficult in terms of morale, or do you think that people will just still respect perhaps the practicality of this decision?
I would hope the latter. I mean, yeah, it's being the CEO of a major corporation or being a general is in certain odd ways like equally unsuitable for the VA, which is a government bureaucracy. That's different from the military, where you can bring a soldier in and say, all right, man, you're out of your position, you're done. You failed, get lost. Or in the private world, where you can do some form of the same. Presumably after lots of attempts to rehabilitate and correct the person's misbehavior. And my understanding of the VA is that is not the case. Like, this is one of those things where you get tenured and you're just in there. Again, I've never worked for the VA, so I can't say for sure, but it seems like a lot of one of the big things that people have said about the incoming secretary is that he or she, in this case, he should have the power to hire and fire, especially mid-level bureaucrats. So I don't know if Procter & Gamble or being a 4-star general is going to be better or worse, but I don't think there's any. Me personally, it doesn't make a difference. I mean, Hagel had 5 years in the military, and he's a not great Secretary of Defense. Bob Gates had no time in the military, and he was an awesome Secretary of Defense. So.
Well, we're going to have to wrap it up soon, so I just want to get Molly, on the whole, are you optimistic about turning the VA around?
I am. I think that the amount of attention that the story has gotten, I think, is really great. I think that again, I think that there's sometimes a kind of memory problem or visibility problem where we say support the troops. You know, we during a war or during wartime, everybody feels very patriotic, and then years go by, and I think sometimes people do not continue to actively think about the troops, and so I think that. As kind of horrifying as it is to see how widespread this problem was and how many veterans, were not receiving adequate care, I do hope that the amount of attention that this has gotten will remind people that this is something that there needs to be an ongoing commitment to.
Adrian, how optimistic are you about the future of the VA?
I'm pretty optimistic. I think a lot of the most meaningful institutional changes were put into play over the last 5 years. And so long as we're judicious about the interventions we have over the next 5 to 10 years, we should be able to staunch the flow of veterans coming back from bad places with serious problems. So I'm hopeful.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Molly and Adrian, for joining me today. To continue the conversation, share your thoughts with us on Twitter at BreakThru News. We'll be right back in a moment after this quick excerpt from a special episode of Live Studio featuring Teen Girl Scientist Monthly.
Late spring 97, tubes going out, tubes coming in, but I can't remember anything. Dirty bodies fighting in their own homes, brother rests his hand on my shoulder. I tell them I know. Oh, wanna sing you an elegy. Oh, but would you even care?
That was Molly Neffel and Adrian Bonenberger. You can now find his book out now, Afghan Post, published by the Head in the Hand Press. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm Charlotte Hohenstein, and this is BreakThru News, your window into today. Be sure to check out breakthrough.radio.com through the weekend for our continued theme week coverage on BTR, including our guide to the best album-oriented cover bands and indie side projects from across the internet. That's it for what's breaking through the news today. Tell us what's breaking through your world on Twitter at BreakThru News. I'm Charlotte Hohenstein, and thank you for joining us.